Welcome to the MSP Corner podcast, led by our CEO, Fernando Leon, and co-founder and CEO of our MSSP, Gregory Morowitz. Each week, the MSP Corner is committed to delivering critical information for the IT service firm industry. We will discuss proven strategies for marketing, attracting an audience, how to become the influencer for an industry, selling value, scaling your IT service business, and building a sustainable IT service firm. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is podcast number 3, and we have our very first guest joining us today, and I'd like to welcome to the discussion on the advantages and disadvantages of utilizing white label services. And joining us is David McGilvery, a prominent figure in the managed services and outsourcing industry. As a founder and member of Intergrid, a reputable white label managed service channel, David brings a wealth of experience in business operations, delivery, and sales. And throughout his career, he has worked with various distributors, providers, VARs, and MSPs. So providing him with that experience and valuable insight into the realm of managed services. And in this conversation, we're going to dive into the benefits and drawbacks of leveraging white label services and exploring their impact on businesses and discussing strategies to mitigate potential risks. And joining me is obviously my co-host, Gregory Morowitz, but we're going to fire away with David. And David, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you making time because I know you're a pretty busy guy. So thank you so much.
So thanks for having me on, Fernando and Gregory. Appreciate it.
Well, we're going to dive right into it because I know you're pressed for time and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I mean, you've been in the industry for what, 40 plus years, right? I mean, you've been in IT for a very long time.
You just made me very old, but go ahead.
And that was not intentional, trust me. But you have been in the industry for a while, right?
Yes, when we started out with outsourcing and doing big custom deals with large enterprise clients because the infrastructures were so different that it really didn't fit the smaller organizations, and it was really focused on large enterprises like Citicorp, Paramount Pictures, Solar Power, Conagra Frozen Foods. The list goes on and on.
Now, you've obviously seen the market evolve, but how have you seen the industry change over the years? Because a lot of shifts have been made, and which has made outsourcing a lot easier, and it's made it easier for organizations to scale. And obviously, we have the offshoring of a lot of these type of services, but you're in a very unique position at your firm where you do provide onshore opportunities, so organizations don't have to be relying on offshore resources. Can you tell us a little bit about how that's changed over the years?
Sure. So I guess a long time ago when it started, like I was saying, is that the large corporations, their infrastructure was very custom to them, right? We didn't have the standardization that we have today. And so therefore, taking over even a portion of it was a major undertaking, right? So as the industry has gone from proprietary operating systems and structure for the infrastructure itself and the design of that to more of an open type standardization, it's really, I've seen a big transition from those custom deals to now I can get economies of scale because, you know, there's not that much difference between a client if they're manufacturing it or if their financial institution is still using UCCE or whatever that is, right? So it's much more standard around what the infrastructures are looking like. Yes, there's different service levels that are needed, and there's some customization as far as especially around applications. But as far as the core infrastructure, it's really gotten to the point that you can really scale being in quote unquote the outsourcing of managed services space.
Got it. Got it. Now, we've had these conversations in the past, but you've also mentioned why partners are, why partner with other providers. I mean, you build a pretty solid case as to why IT firms do that. I mean, they've been doing this for a long time. It's just now it's becoming very popular. But can you dive into that just a little bit, because you have a much more exposure to that than us. So can you explain why IT firms, even small ones, should partner with other providers to that would allow them to scale, right? I mean, that's
Right.
what we're seeing
So
today.
there's a couple of them. First of all, partnering has been going on since the outsourcing business started, right? I mean,
Yep.
I work for a company that competed against IBM. And guess what? When we took over clients' infrastructure, we didn't know IBM's how to run IBM systems that well. We hired IBM as a subcontractor, even though we were the prime. And what I say is sometimes you're competitors, sometimes you're partners, and sometimes you were customers of each other. So that partnering's been going on for years. We just didn't call it white label. We called it subcontracting. We called it whatever you want, right? Um, and so that's what I saw on one side. The other side is that you can't know every single technology, right? And so you
Yep.
tell customers that you should partner with me, or you should use my services because I'm an expert in this area. And all of a sudden, the client buys somebody or gets bored or needs to expand or whatever that is, and you may not have that technology expertise, certifications, and that type of thing. And I've worked with lots of resellers or VARs, whatever you want to call, that have taken over clients, and then they acquired somebody, and all of a sudden they got different technology, and they're sitting there looking at the big investment and the learning that it would take to support that different environment, right? And then the other thing too that I say is that if the only tool I have in my bag is a hammer, everything's a nail. Meaning that when I was doing this at Unisys or Siemens, at Presidio, we had one way to deliver the services, right? And so therefore, we would go in and make it fit, whether it was too big for the client or too small for the client, because that's all you had to sell. Where if when you partner, you can get the right solution for a client. Because as you well know, I go in and work with resellers, and they can go from a hospital with 10,000 endpoints, users, right? Telephone points, endpoints there. And they also have a law firm that has 12 seats. You don't need the same level of service, the same infrastructure in the operations side to support those two different ones. They have different service levels. So what I see is by partnering, you can stay in your lane of where your expertise is and where your scale is. And then you're able to add customers that maybe were not 100% comfortable with, but you have the right fit by having a good partner next to you.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that's a huge advantage that IT firms have now, because services like yourself, you find them the right partner first, and then it just creates a remarkable synergy, because that it allows them to focus on their area of expertise and partner with a firm that you would bring on board, so they don't have to, let's say, provide after hour support when they were only providing business hour support. Because building a team, as for after hour support, you got to do you got to hire more people, you got to manage those people, and it's just a huge headache. And by partnering with firms that can deliver that after hours is quite the benefit for these smaller IT firms. But
Right, because I'll work with the partners out there, and they'll have an answering who's on call and that type of thing. And there goes your CCIE was up all night long fixing a PC, and
yep,
now you can't roll out. You have a rollout that they're supposed to be doing that the client is counting on, and you're kind of stuck, right? And
yep,
so by partnering for those other areas that the client needs when they really need it at 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're trying to do a filing for the next day, whether that's a legal brief or something like that, you still got to support that client, right? And so by partnering, that one example of a service desk for after hours, or all of a sudden you bring a large client on, and you won this client, and all of a sudden you got 5,000 end users that all of a sudden you got to support. How do you scale that, and how do you do that cost effectively, and how do you have the operations behind it and the tool set to focus on that while you're still running your business, right? So
Yep.
I kind of alluded almost to a car dealership where I look at providers being the factory behind the scenes, right? They're building the car, they're doing the investments, right? That's a big thing, right? The investments to stay up on it. Behind the scenes, keeping that going. And in the meantime, the dealer, right, is having a relationship with the client, knows exactly what they need, is the interface to the client, and really is that trusted advisor for the client, right? Because if I go in, I want to know I don't want to talk to somebody at the Ford factory. I want to talk to the local Ford dealer, right? Because that's who I'm going to be calling if I need something.
That's right. That's a great analogy, and that's thank you for explaining that, because there's a lot of misperceptions with IT firms that, oh, partnering with somebody provides a lot of risk. I would never have the front line be representing my organization. So can you provide some pros and cons on why partnering with a white label firm? There's pros and cons to everything. So can you give us a few bullet points on the pros and the cons,
Mm-hmm.
so we get this message across that, look, there's going to be challenges everywhere, regardless if you bring it in-house. I mean, we could go with lots of pros and cons for in-house also, but the white label platform just provides so much more flexibility, and it provides so much, I think, so many more benefits, I believe, over in-house. So uh, as a expert in your field, yeah, just give us some pros and cons on how you feel about this white label platform.
So so overall, it's very positive, right, for me, because even in internal organizations, I didn't run the knock, even though I had the customers, right, in the southern region, for instance, and they were my customers, but I had to interface with somebody that was responsible for the network operations center, or the help desk, or the SOC, right? I didn't have those direct
Yep.
resources because there was, again, economies of scale, right?
Yep.
And so you're going to have to partner anyway, right? That's number one, no matter how big it is. Number two is, I think it's the expansion of your portfolio, because if you're staying in one little area and say, okay, I'm an expert in this, well, the client needs those other services. They're going to be going someplace else for those services, right?
Yep.
And so therefore, then you're not going to be as much the trusted advisor, okay, that they count on, right? And then you can focus on your core competencies, like I said earlier, instead of trying to be so diverse that you're not going to be able to keep up with those couple of core technologies. And I also think that you just can't be 100% reseller. You have to bring value both from a consultative standpoint and a technology standpoint, that you have to have some value and you're not just a broker reselling those services, right? So to me, it's not just a broker type of structure. It's, I need to expand my services. I need to have these additional competencies out there, those types of things. The other thing is, I think people need to understand a little bit around the cost of doing these things, right? Because running a service desk, for instance, there's constant training that goes on, right? There's constantly, you need to have the people at the service desk being kept up to date of what is out there in the technology. And doing that in a smaller one, you really lose a handle on it, quite frankly, right? And
Yep.
also, they don't have if you're a smaller firm, your employees, excuse me, don't have a real good career path, right? They're waiting for, Jim to retire before I can move up. But if it's a large organization that's constantly growing, there's more chance that that person is going to stay there and grow with the organization, right?
Yep. Yep.
And I talked a little bit about the access to expertise, because you may not be an expertise in a certain technology that your client's either looking for or inherited, or that type of thing, right? And we talked about scale, because you could be bringing on a large client, and how do you scale up that quick? Or God forbid, knock on wood, that you lose a client, and all of a sudden you got to downsize, or you got to scale up, right? And we talked about scale, because you could be bringing on a large client, and how do you scale up that quick? Or God forbid, knock on wood, that you lose a client, and all of a sudden you got to downsize, or you got to scale up that quick? Well, that goes, especially in smaller communities, that goes pretty through there fast. That, oh, as soon as they lose a contract, they let everybody go, right? And so then you're not going to get good talent. And I talked about the flexibility depending upon what clients need. And also, what I saw and like shocked me, quite frankly, is that the smaller reseller would go, "Oh, well, my client is opening a sales office in Broken Spoke, Wyoming. Let me see who's in Broken Spoke, Wyoming." And they would call their competitor, who they had no relationship with. They really didn't know how good they were. It was word of mouth. And all of a sudden, they're letting the fox into the hen house as opposed to having a true partner that's channel focused, that's not going to compete with them, with the end customer, of going in there, right? And then the other thing, I think it also, you got to make sure that they align with how you do business, right? Because there's all different providers out there. And I think one of the things that happens is that, and I've done it, right? So I'm guilty, is that, oh my God, we won, we got to find somebody that does this. And you run around and you find somebody and they didn't align with you. So you really need to almost do your portfolio management ahead of time, right? So those are all the pros, right? I'm a little bit in sales, so I'll tell the pros first. But on the con side, yeah, it reduces your control a little bit, right? Because you have a statement of work with your provider right behind there, and they're going to try to stay within that statement of work. The key, though, is like I said earlier, is getting a provider that aligns with your, as a company's philosophy. And if your philosophy, and you know this well, is let's take care of the client and figure things out afterwards, right?
Yep.
That's one type of partner you want, right? There's
Yep.
other ones that the reseller is very strict to the statement of work. This is what I do. I don't go outside of that. And then you can also get somebody like that, right? So it's a little bit around your control and how much you like it. Maybe a little bit about your brand isn't like, oh, I don't do everything. And maybe a little bit of dilution in the brand. People think about that. But I'll tell you, one example was that I was working with a reseller out in the Phoenix area, and they had a pretty large client that they were doing engineering work for, design work for. And they said, oh, well, now we have knock services, right? 24/7, 365. The client looked at him and said, what is that, between the soda machine and the water fountain? I know your office. You can't be doing that. And they go, oh, no, we partnered with another firm. This is who we're partnering with. And the client's like, oh, that's great. I like their knock services, but I like your engineering. And so you're going to be working with them to make sure that if they run into problems, you're going to take care of it. So it's also, you can get some credibility by letting clients know that, hey, I'm partnering for this area. I found a good partner, right? A little bit around the maybe integration piece of it, making sure that the flows work between the two organizations. But I think that's pretty well straightened out. And I'll put a caveat on that. When you find a provider that is channel focused, and I'll just take a little bit of a sidebar, is a lot of times people say they're an MSP. Oh, I want to sell to the channel. I want to be channel. They're not even channel ready. They don't understand what the channel is. They don't understand channel conflict. They don't understand the contracts. They don't understand how to answer the phone. They have no ticketing system that's set up for that. And they're just trying to expand their sales force without understanding that, right? And so I think those are some of the cons that you can address, but just be aware of.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get it. I feel like a lot of this questions regarding outsourcing, they for some reason people connect it with offshoring. Do you also provide offshoring knocks and socks, or are all your partners onshore?
So we made, and I have nothing against offshoring. So let me first put that out. I was a big offshore, right? I had India, I had the Philippines, I had Hong Kong for a while, right? So I have nothing against outsourcing, offshoring outsourcing. Okay, so I want to put that out there. But again, it depends. First of all, and I hate that answer, but I can see offshoring the higher you get up in the stack, the more I used to use it, right? I hated it for level one because end users have no patience, right? They
Yeah.
don't speak the same
Yeah.
language, but you get an engineer on the phone and it doesn't matter where they are in the world and what their accent is, they're talking engineering technology types of language, right? And so that's number one. What we've did is we didn't focus on offshoring, right? There's lots of great offshoring firms. They do real economies of scale. They're very cost effective for the right client, right? And what we found is that our reseller community out there is really focused more on, I would say, consultative with the end customer. So all our providers that we have are onshore within the United States, right? And it was just a strategy that we put in place that said, this is what we're going to bring to the table. You kind of the same thing, right? I'm telling my resellers out there that you should stay in your lane, and I'm saying in my lane, I'm saying this is what we're going to do is stay within the lane. So I try to practice what I preach.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And well, I appreciate you outlining that for us. But um, one of the biggest questions with every business, right, is margins and the percentages. Uh, what do you see as a reseller who is partnering with a white label provider? What do you see the increase or the percentage that they're typically marking things up by?
So they usually, I tell people, okay, that when you're buying that service from a reputable provider, you have usually 20-25 markup, right, that you can do on it, right?
Yep.
That's kind of it. Now, cloud service, let me put cloud to the side because that's a total commodity. There's hardly any margin in it for anybody. So I'll put that to the side for now, right?
Yep.
But I think that most of the services are in the 20-25% range. Now, people are going to go, well, I can make 40 if I do it myself. That's GP, right? Gross profit. Let me tell you,
Yep.
okay, you don't have that much risk on the white label services. You don't have the training. There's so much stuff, and I have models for it that the EBITDA itself, the dollars you put in your pocket, are about the same or a little bit more. Okay, just depending on it, right? But it's not dramatically one way or the other. I'll just be honest, right?
Yep.
With it. And so therefore, it's around the 20-25% from a margin standpoint. But again, you don't have the risk that you have if you're delivering it yourself, right?
Yep. Yep. No, that's true. That's true. That's one of the benefits is that there's just too many benefits. I feel
Right,
like.
but you have to make sure too, right, that the provider that you're with or working with understands the channel and understands that their cost is lower, right? For
Yep.
two reasons. One is there's the cost of sales, right?
Yep. Yep.
And if they're not channel ready, they're not going to want to differentiate their salespeople, right? So they're going to want to give them their commissions too. And by the time you get done, right, your per salesperson is going to get shot between the eyes if you're not careful because you're going to put your 20-25 points on it. And the client's going to go, well, I could buy it direct for less than that, right? So you got to
Sure.
make sure that the provider understands the channel space, understands the benefits of the sales organization, right? Finding that lead, qualifying that lead, right? Having a high closure rate. And then the other thing is when I was doing delivery, I would say 70-80% of my escalations were non-technical escalations. They were
Mm.
out of scope. It was either the salesperson promised something that was not true, or the client didn't realize what they were buying, or they didn't like the service level, or whatever it was. And what I look at is, again, the dealer and the factory at the Ford dealership. If somebody comes in and says, well, I got a Ford truck and I only got two doors and I wanted to fit 8 people in my truck, well, guess what? You didn't buy the right vehicle, right, type of thing. You're not going to go back to the factory and complain, right? And so it's also their escalations in the channel go way down because that partner who's out there with the client is fielding those non-technical escalations, right? And really
Sure.
keeps down the operational cost too. And if you don't find a provider that understands that, then you don't have a good channel partner.
Yep. Yep. No, I completely agree. You know, who do you see? What do the trends look like as far as like who's taking advantage of these type of partnerships? Is it more VARs, small IT firms, one man, two man shows? Is it break fix firms that are trying to transition to the MSP model? Because the MSP model is becoming the norm in today's business. The break fix is just dying. It's dying fast, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
has no value in the IT space. So who do you see taking advantage of these, because you have a large portfolio of services you offer? Who do you see coming to you as far as like who's your ideal prospect? Who's your ideal IT firm that you're working with?
So it's kind of so. I won't say it depends, but uh, what happens is that you have the VARs out there, right? That they've been selling product for years, made a good living off of it, have certain commissions set up for their salespeople, have all their goals and everything else. The principals there see that they really need to change, right? Because that's dropping. I know everybody's been saying it for years and it's still doing it. They're still out there, but they want to change. However, it's so hard for them to change from they're used to getting the money right away. I sell $1 million deal. I make my 6 points on it. I get my 60 grand. I pay my commission, boom. And I put somebody that they got to sell a couple $1 million a year, and I'm making my number, and I'm paying my salespeople. And it's Groundhog Day, right? They got to do that the
Yeah.
next day. But when they sell a $1 million managed services deal, it could be over 3 years, and they having a hard time transitioning that, right? But they want to.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
the break fix, they have a hard time, I think, positioning the consultative sell because it's a lot more around the value and the consultative piece of it, right? And they there. And for me, the ultimate partner out there for reselling is somebody that's already an MSP or an MSSP, right? And they want to expand their portfolio and they realize that they can't do it by themselves, but they know how to position it. They understand the compensation models. They understand contracts, right? Because I've gone into lots of VARs. I go, okay, where's your master service agreement? Well, it's the warranty that Cisco gives. Like, what? No, that doesn't work, right? And so
Yeah.
we help them with that, right? And most of and it's not really the 1 or 2 person shop that I see, because they're usually an engineer that has a couple of clients that are there doing it, right? Unless they have a strategic growth plan, right?
Sure.
It's usually the shops that are 5, 10, 25 people. They're covering, maybe they got a couple offices in a tri-state area, and they're realizing that they either have to grow because their clients are asking for more, or they're just going to get stuck and then get passed by. So that's really what I see is more for me, I don't have to teach them a lot of this. I'll put it in quotes, basic MSP consultative selling. They understand that piece of it. But I have reseller partners across the spectrum.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Well, you've answered all my questions, and I think you've provided us with a remarkable overview on what you have to offer, how you help IT firms deliver, or help them scale, because your white label platform gives them a number of partners to choose from when to fill gaps within their organization. So
Yeah, and I look at it as a more of a portfolio management, right? Because if you
sure.
look at large corporations, IT organizations, whether that's Atos, Converge One, E Plus, Presidio, you name them. They all have a portfolio management group, right? That looks to see how they're going to deliver those services. That's a lot of overhead, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we go do all that work, right? We make sure they're channel ready, the providers, making sure that they play nicely, right? That the contracts are not just one-sided, which is a big thing out there. And so then we work with the providers on one side and then the resellers on the other side, right? So we kind of sit in between as a portfolio management, making sure that alignment and being a trusted advisor on both sides, right?
Yep.
Because as a friend of mine said, this isn't like a used car lot. It's 5 years or the first 50 feet, whatever comes first. This is usually long-term contracts. There's always something that pops up, right? And you want to make sure that your partner is a provider, and it's not that everything goes great. Okay, they're great. No, it's what happens when something doesn't go great, that a client isn't happy, or they have an emergency, or whatever, and how do they step up and do the right thing for everybody's client, right? Because that end
Yep.
customer, without them, we're nothing.
Yep. Yep. That is true. Our co-host Gregory hasn't really said anything. I wonder if he has any questions because he's been a little quiet. Gregory, do you have anything you want to share?
Yeah, so David, you remember the old days, which were what, 3 years ago, where where everyone kind of like wanted you to have a data center, a knock or a sock, where everyone was kind of centralized, located. Our knock is in Chicago or whatever, and they want to come visit it and see the people like sitting at desks and stuff like that. Since the pandemic, do you think that's permanently changed, that we're kind of moving into our own little micro world of mini outsourcing, where we're hiring people in Oregon to be in our knock, we're hiring people in
Mm-hmm.
Florida. It doesn't really matter where you are anymore. No one really cares anymore where they used to care a lot. We would lose and get deals based on how big our data center was. They wanted to see the command center, or else they weren't going to go with you. I mean, is that permanently changed, and is it now a world of micro outsourcing anyway, where Fernando's talking about white labeling? Isn't that what you're kind of doing, like at a micro basis, by hiring a guy in Florida?
So it's kind of funny is that we used to put up big screens. No one used the screens. And you know this, every agent was working at their desktop, but we had big screens up there because that was impressive. Let's spend $1 million, right? Um,
Right.
and so, we were, and the same thing, right? And I think half of it was that the IT people never got to go out. And so therefore we used to bring them, there and have a really nice dinner, and they would see it and it'd feel really good. And so I think part of that was a facade, right? Even 3 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever. Um, and it's kind of funny is that when I was running engagement, right, having people that were actually solution architects putting the deals together, I didn't care where they lived, right? I was looking for talent. As long as they were near an airport, I didn't care because they were never in the right place anyway. You would never, you would go, oh, well, let's get them in NFL cities. Yeah,
Yep.
guess what? My deal is in, Broken Spoke, Wyoming. Sorry, Texarkana I had to go to. Like, really, right? And so I think that it is, Greg, to answer you directly, I do believe it is changing because technology is there, the security, if you do it correctly, is there, and I want talented people, right? And I'd much rather have a happy person that's sitting, looking over a lake and didn't commute an hour and a half to downtown San Francisco to sit in a no window room, right? And I'd much rather have somebody there. And I also think that it's also helping to scale and the cost, because you don't need everybody there. The volumes are not the same all day long, right? So it's usually early in the morning you get the calls, and then right around lunchtime when everybody wants to go to lunch, they're going to call in like for the end user piece of it, right? And then at the end of the day is the other big hit, right? So people can then work when you need them and not have to sit at a desk 8 hours a day and only be really utilized 50% of the time because you don't have the call volume coming in. And you can model it all you want. You can use, Blue Pumpkin and all those tools to do all the modeling. And you've done this enough, Gregory, and you know that, man, I only need this person for like 4 hours a day, this time of the day. I need somebody. And so I think we're getting better talent because of that, and happier employees, happier agents, happier, like you said, is it micro outsourcing that the person is sitting in Georgia, right? In my own office in Georgia, it doesn't matter where I am. I got technology. I got fiber to the desk, and I'm out here, 100 miles outside of Atlanta.
Wow. Yeah. 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 Geography no longer is factoring in based on all the technology that's out there. And it just helps firms run more efficiently. And with budgets being so tight as they are, yeah, it allows you to build teams without having to have all these budget constraints, right? Because somebody in Atlanta is going to be a lot less expensive than somebody in San Francisco. I can guarantee that.
Well, so one is like Gregory said, there used to be these big data centers, and let me walk
Yep.
you through and impress you, right, with these big data centers. And then let me take you to the knock and let me show you all the big screens and all our tools, right? And I think nobody wants to travel just for the sake of traveling, right? Anymore. And it's kind of funny is that, and talk about the Ford dealership, is I called a Ford dealer that I use, and I'm talking to a woman, right? And I mean, like boom, bounce services, ding, ding, ding. And I talked to her, and she goes, "Oh yeah, well, I was gonna leave because my husband got a new job, and they said, oh, we'll just give you a phone. Can you work from your new location?" She goes, "Oh yeah, that'd be great." So for years she was going into that office, and now they don't have to pay for her facilities. She doesn't
Yep.
have to travel, right? So she's much happier. And yes, there's the little bit of probably team building that you need to take a little bit more advantage of somehow, whether that's through webinars with your team or maybe having some team building events to pull them together to get that space. But I fully agree, Gregory, that I think that it's become much more of a macro outsourcing to somebody that's wants to be in Salt Lake City to go skiing because that's what their passion is.
Well, now that you've agreed with me, here comes the KO punch to you, which is if you've ever worked for the government, you'll go into a meeting and a person will ask you a question to validate their existence, right? The question can be stupid, but it's always the same question from the same set of people, but they're always like, they're just trying to validate their existence. And now that data center tour is gone and the knock tour and the TV screens are gone, what has got that something's going to have to replace it, right? Because those people are out there still trying to justify their existence. In the old days, they justified it by going, "We'll go see their knock." Now what are they looking for now? What is that group of just government justifiers looking for instead of the knock and the sock? What are they looking for that these MSPs are going to have to be aware of, that these individuals are going to be asking about, versus going and seeing the TV screens?
Well, two things. First of all, I don't think it was just limited to government agencies, right?
No.
Because and I used to tell my salespeople, and Fernando knows this with me, is like I won't get on calls because either if I'm on a call and I have a qualified quality salesperson there on the call, either I'm not going to say something and the client's going to go, well, he added a lot of value with a twit, right? Or to your point, Gregory, I'm going to ask a question just to validate of why I'm there, right? So
Right.
I think that though, to answer you, it's going to be events to educate these people on new technology. We're bringing experts in, whether that's around cybersecurity, managed services, the newest technology coming out, where application trends are going. So I think that events, local events, and maybe you have to have 2 or 3 depending upon how big the geography is. But I think it's going to be client events, and you can have providers come in and talk about the latest.
Can I put words in your mouth and say it's now moving more towards what your tech stack is?
Yes, thank you. He's like Jim. He just cuts me off and says the 3 words that make sense.
So the tech stack is now kind of replacing these justifiers, right? They're like, well, what kind of tech stack? I think we're hearing more of the question of what kind of tech stack are you using, and we haven't heard that before. It was more of how many is your screens, 55 inches or 60 inches?
Yeah.
That kind
No,
of
it's definitely around the tech stack and how you can educate them on that.
All right. Great.
Yeah, I get a lot of those questions too on my end, even though I'm not on the technology side, but there's a lot of questions that float around on like, what is the ideal tech stack for MSPs? And, it all comes down to who is your audience, right? Who are your clients? Do they need to be compliant, or are they just small businesses that are just, they're in they're legal firms, or they're just accountants? Well, the bare bones, right? Your RMM tool, your EDR, backup. I mean, those are going to be the backbone to your company's success, because if you can restore data, you can protect them, and you can automate patching with scripting with your RMM tool. You're set. You're going to create a low maintenance environment. You're going to have little problems. So yeah, the tech stack is so important these days, and there's a lot of. I mean, it seems like a new RMM tool comes out every week, but yeah, that's the new the trend now of discussing what is the ideal tech stack.
I agree.
Yeah, yeah. Gregory, you got anything else, or you checked off your boxes there?
I checked off my boxes.
Okay, good. Well, David, thank you so much for joining us today. I know we're gonna have you back because you got a lot more. I know your firm offers a lot more than just these white label platforms. I mean, you're an expert when it comes to sales, commission structuring, and so I want to have you back soon. So be ready. I'm gonna call you up again and say, hey, David, we need to have you back on.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure I warrant that praise, but thank you.
Okay, you got it.
Thanks, Gregory.
Sure,
Thanks,
anytime.
guys. Have a good one.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for listening. If you have not joined the MSP Corner, go to mspcorner.com.